Hi, everybody. It's Jennifer Tarl. Welcome back to the Real Work Podcast. I'm super excited to welcome Rodney Weir today. Rodney is a physical therapist. He has his doctorate in physical therapy, and he is currently working as an instructor at Western Michigan. He previously has worked in hospitals and schools. And before his career, I think this is so interesting and I can't wait to learn more about it. He was the drum major at Michigan and he now sponsors a scholarship for students in underserved communities to encourage them to go to college and to participate in band. So join me in welcoming Rodney. Hi, Rodney. How are you?
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you here. So we always start with, why don't you walk me through your resume and just kind of tell me a little bit about how you got here?
Sure. No, I'm happy to do that. I went to physical therapy school in Chicago way back when. I teach now in a physical therapy program, and I usually don't give dates because it's been a while. But
I get that.
I moved to Chicago from Michigan, grew up in Michigan, went to school at Northwestern, graduated in 1999, stayed in Chicago, worked at different places, worked at the old Michael Reese Hospital, worked at Illinois Masonic. I went to Loyola for a little bit. So worked in different rehab settings, different hospital settings, and eventually started in the public schools, which is how we met.
Yes.
So I did physical therapy in the public schools for, I think, 11 years. And during that time, I went back to school myself. So I got a doctorate in physical therapy and also a doctorate of health science at Midwestern. And that kind of propelled me to work in academia. So I started at Western Michigan University in 2019. It was a new physical therapy program. So everything was new with classes, developing everything from scratch. So I've been doing that since 2019. I was fully tenured last year, which was a process.
Exciting.
But I'm set and pretty much established, and things are going well there.
Okay. So what is a health science degree? I'm not quite sure what that is.
So it's just a different type of doctorate. So it's a doctorate of health science.
Got
it's
it.
not your
Okay.
typical PhD. It doesn't have the same focus on research as a PhD. There was more education towards teaching, those types of things. So learning how to teach, there's more focus on that.
Okay. So have you always wanted to be a physical therapist? How did you come into this career?
I took 5 years off, and it's so interesting talking to students because we have students now that took, even a couple of years off to think about what they wanted to do, which is essentially what I did. So I took 5 years off and looked into careers, and that's eventually what I landed on. It was very different back in the day. As you know, it's not like you could just look things up on the internet. So, going to the library, going to different career, the University of Michigan had different career services. So I was able to go and investigate things there. But, doing my due diligence, I like exercise, I like movement. So that was the draw.
So did you do like an undergrad and then you took 5 years off, or did you take 5 years off and then go to college?
So I went straight through my undergrad from high school, graduated in 92. And then I didn't start physical therapy school until 97. So there were 5 years there.
Yeah. So what kind of led you to do that after like 5 years? What did you learn about yourself?
I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I worked at different research labs. And when I think about what I made, I don't know how I even lived on what I made, So it was very minimal with, you were just limited with opportunities you had unless you went to grad school. So that's eventually what I did. So, just knowing that there was only so much I could do, and there were many more opportunities. So I went back to school. So I eventually looked into different programs, and that's what I landed on.
Yeah.
It's been a great career.
Yeah.
Because there's so many options. And I tell students that now there's so many things you can do, so many different areas you can work in. Even having a conversation with a speech therapist yesterday, there's nowhere near as much focus on school-based physical therapy, but it is an option. It's a much bigger part of programs for speech therapy. But there's a lot of things you can do, and it's one of the reasons that I ended up choosing that as a career.
Yeah. I know you've worked in many different places and they all probably have their pros and cons, but can you tell me a little bit about the different places? Like if someone wants to be a PT, right, and they don't know where you would even work, like what did you do in a hospital versus a school versus now? Like how are they the same and how are they different?
So hospital work, not to, it's hospital work. There's a lot of teamwork that goes along with that. Like you're generally not working on your own, but you're working with doctors, you're working with nurses, you're working with other rehab professionals, including speech therapists, to figure out, what someone can do and essentially where they're going to end up. So, there's a lot of teamwork that's involved in that, which is different from, even did home health for a little bit where you're out there on your own. You're going from place to place, going into homes and providing therapy in that, in that arena. So in that way, just with the teamwork, it was actually pretty similar between the hospital and what we did in the schools. You're working on your own to provide PT, but you're part of the team. There's psychologists, there's speech therapists, there's social workers, there's OTs. All these people are working together to get a plan written and figure out the best possible services and provide children with what they need. Schools it was fascinating, being a PT and just driving around from place to place, going to all these places, meeting with different people. So that was unique about the school system. And that's not always going to happen, but there in Chicago, that was kind of the setup where you were just going from place to place. It was hard for students to kind of understand that when I had PT students that would come in, just to understand that we're going to all these different places, and it was just a lot to keep track of. Mm-hmm. But Chicago is a fascinating place. It's fascinating to work in the schools. I was able to go all over Chicago, the south side, the north side, the west side. I went all over, and just to see the differences in the neighborhoods, and you really get to know the city by doing that. So it was just fascinating to see all the different parts of the city and how that really comes through in the schools that you go into.
Yeah.
It's not all the same.
Yeah, it's I do think that like therapy fields are so great, speech therapist, of course, and I was citywide also in Chicago, and it's so interesting because you never have the same day. It's almost like you're in different states or different countries, at least in Chicago, because there are so many different immigrant communities. And I just found that so fascinating. And I did love going from place to place. Like you said, it's not for everyone. So I think that's good to keep in mind if you're looking for something. Now let's get back to academia. What do you like about teaching now?
It's working with students and helping them on their path. Mm-hmm. Students are obviously young, just starting out. So, trying to help them kind of grasp what physical therapy is. And there's a transformation that happens, entering a professional program, having gone through school. Some of them haven't yet worked. So taking on more professional role, that's part of it too. It isn't just the academics. It's not just school content, taking exams, all that, but that transformation that happens where you're taking on more responsibility, you're in a role that people are just going to look at you differently. So there's, just helping students understand that some of the changes that happen, when they come in, they become more confident. You can see the changes, and that's what it's all about, just as they go through that path and really take on that identity that comes with going through a professional program. So I've enjoyed working with them, not just the teaching, but we have applied discovery, which is essentially a research program that I have helped with too. So helping students on that path, taking on a research project and everything that goes into that, and that's another place where I'm able to work with them, get to know them. Going through a project from start to finish, we're able to, do a lot, and, just to see them present at the end is mind blowing.
Yeah. So I love that you work with people who are sort of non-traditional students, I'm going to call them, like people who've maybe worked a little bit, and then more of your traditional student, what are the big differences between the two? And then I also would love to hear, like, what are your suggestions for just your more traditional students? So first of all, what's the difference between those two groups?
So there's just more awareness, more insights to some of the professionalism that you need for students that have worked in other places and other settings. We've had students that have been more than I was, students in their 30s that have come back that have had full-fledged careers. So, just that perspective of just everything that goes, a lot of the intangibles that go into any job that you have, just everything you're responsible for. They just have that awareness. It's challenging sometimes for them because most of the students are traditional students that just don't have that work experience. So even within the cohort that we have, there can be challenges with them kind of engaging and, just with any group of people, that can be hard for them, just working with other students that don't have that perspective. But, they bring a lot to our program. And it's helpful I think it's helpful to have a mix. So I really appreciate having students that at least have some work experience. For traditional students, it really, even in this day and age with AI and the internet, it's all about getting out there and getting as much experience as you can to understand what you're getting into. That's really the key, is to really see what happens for a PT during their workday, to understand everything that they're responsible for, all the different places that PTs work. It's not just an outpatient clinic working with athletes, but, hospitals, even schools, just all the different places. So just really understanding everything that goes into it and everything that you're responsible for.
So you mentioned that traditional students who are just new to this, who have never really worked or had a career, they need more experiences, they need to observe, and they need exposure. I 100% agree. I couldn't agree more. So how do students get that?
It's getting harder and harder, as I'm sure you know, with some of the observation experiences. Back in the day, I almost hate saying that, but back in the day, it was a lot easier to get into some of the places to get some of those observation experiences. But, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but with HIPAA laws, with privacy, with protections, it's harder to do it, but it's worthwhile. A lot of outpatient clinics are able to get into more. And some of it, even if you're not able to get into a clinic, most PTs, most people are going to be open to having some of those discussions if you reach out. So even if you can't go and work in some of those places, you can try to meet people that are working in that profession and get some of their insight and some of their perspective and, some of their guidance to help with that process.
Yeah. So it's so interesting because I've been doing this now for, I think, like about 4 months, and literally in almost every interview, people who are of our age cohort will say, you need to reach out, you need to meet people in the industry. Basically, in summary, you need to network. And I find that, and you hit on something else, like with AI and with Google, I think a lot of times younger people may think, again, I'm putting ideas into their heads, well, I've already Googled it, I've looked on AI, and I've, had a chat with, some sort of AI platform, but I don't think it replaces that networking and that sort of being in person and chatting with people. So I do want to bring this in because I kind of have a connection here. So you were in the band when you were in college. So tell me about that. Were you always in band? Did you do that in high school? Like, what did you do?
I did it in high school and probably in middle school. I have to give a shout out to my mother because I wanted to quit and she wouldn't let me quit.
I love it. What did you play?
I started off playing the cornet and then I switched to trombone.
What's a cornet?
It's like a trumpet.
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
I didn't know what that was.
I'm not a music person. I don't know all the specific details. They're essentially the same instrument.
Okay.
So,
all right. So you started that in middle school, and then you wanted to quit, and your mom was like, "No, no, no." So then what?
So My sister, my oldest sister, was actually at the University of Michigan, and that's kind of how that started. I didn't really look anywhere else. It was just kind of where I was going.
Okay.
And I just decided I was going to join the band because it is intimidating. You know, that's some of what I talk about. And, you know, just having worked with a band at Western, you know, going to college can be intimidating. It can be scary. You know, just having that group to practice with. It's almost like a pre-made friend group, you know, the social supports that come along with it. So I was glad I did, and I got so much out of it. But
Yeah.
the socialization, the camaraderie, the team building, all of that is, you know, it's always been a part of band, and definitely was part of my experience also.
Yeah, I think that is important. I don't talk about this a lot, but I really did not like college when I got there. I was so homesick. I just wanted to leave. I had no idea. I was so out of my league. I didn't have any friends. And then once I found a group, I went a different route in finding friends. Then it made college doable. Because again, it gets back to that network. I feel like you need more support than I think you even are aware of when you're a lot younger. Okay, so then how do you become a drum major? Are you like chosen? How does that all work?
It's amazing because I went to a tryout, I think 2 years ago, and it's amazing how the process is similar. Every school does it different. But at Michigan, it's someone from the band. You have a tryout and the band will vote. So they're essentially voting for who they want their leader to be after watching the tryout. And it's not all that different now than it was then. So it's not, I think they handed out paper ballots that they would write down with like little golf pencils, probably, where they would write down their
I love it.
And then the band director tallies the votes and announce who the winner is. So it's not all that different.
So is it about performance or is it about leadership or both?
It's both.
Okay. So like
they never used to have an interview. And then they added questions about, you know, why do you want to do this? What do you think you can bring to the position? How are you going to be able to represent the university? So, you know, that's part of it also, but the performance has always been a huge part of it. So the drum major does two big things. So they do the Backbend. It's so terrifying at a school like Michigan because you have a stadium full of people that's been like that.
It's gigantic. If you've never been there, it's like otherworldly. It's crazy.
So you're the last one out. They announce your name and you run out and you do a Backbend. So you essentially have to touch. Back in the day, you used to have to touch your hat to the ground, and now they take their hat off and they touch the whole head to the ground.
Oh, really?
So it's just one of those things. It's just an expectation. Like you just have to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happens is you go down to the goalpost and the drum major will throw their baton over the goalpost. And legend has it, if it's caught, Michigan will win. And if it's dropped, Michigan will lose.
Oh, that's a lot of pressure.
So I never dropped it.
Oh, thank God.
The game we were at. And I have been shocked at how often it gets dropped, not to call anyone out. But also when it is dropped, how often we lose.
Oh, that's crazy. I'm going to have to Google the stats on that. So for a lot of my audience that are not from the US, you must Google and watch a college marching band. In the fall, I love it. Like I get sucked in on like Instagram where you can just scroll through like all of the bands coming out and like it's impressive. It is really, really impressive. What makes a good drum major in your opinion, now that you've done it?
Someone who's a ham, who enjoys the attention, who's able to kind of take in that moment and not get sucked in by all the anxiety and nerves, but is able to kind of work through that and continue to perform.
How do you
for
get
the most
through
part,
that?
Yeah, because it's terrifying. You have all these people that are watching you, and not to keep talking about how it was back in the day, but I know I keep doing that. But we didn't have cell phones. You know, there was nothing like that is present in this day and age. So, just all the pressure of knowing that if you mess up, someone's going to have it on screen and it's going to be all over social media. So, just that added pressure. So just to be able to kind of deal with that and almost forget about it, not think about it, just focus on what you're trying to do.
How did you do that?
You just block it out. You just focus on what you're supposed to be doing.
So stay in the moment.
The first year, I did for 2 years, and the second year was a lot easier. But the first year, you're just blocking out the crowd. You're not even seeing them or trying to pretend like they're not there. So it's there's almost nothing that can prepare you for it. It's just it's a high pressure moment, and you just do what you have to do to get through it.
How many people are there?
Michigan Stadium, it's 100,000. The capacity is 100,000.
It's crazy. So 100,000 people, plus you're probably on television. So then there's...
May or may not be. You don't know.
Yeah. All right. That is really high pressure, and you're very, very calm. Have you always been this calm, or did you learn this after years? Like how did you get to the point where you could literally go out in front of all those people and you're just like, it's okay?
It's you sign up for it and you honestly don't even realize what you're signing up for. So I still remember the tryout when they announced that you win, and it's like, oh crap. The oh crap moment. But there's just it's almost like there's almost an expectation that helps you. Like, this is just what you do. So, you're representing the band, you're representing the university, and you just do what you have to do to get through it. But the calmness, just being able to kind of take in everything, it's just, I don't know, some people just kind of have that. And that's some of the selection process too. The band's able to pick up on some of those things. So that's some of what goes into their selection.
But I think what you said is like, there's a lot of wisdom in that. Like, you just do it and you're in the moment and you're ignoring everything else. And I think, isn't that just the way that like life is sometimes? Kind of like another person said, fake it till you make it kind of a thing. It's kind of that similar thing. It's like, all right, here I am, no turning back, like just forge ahead. What were the big lessons you learned in band that you would tell like a younger person, you should definitely go into band because I learned this?
It's the support. And I alluded to that before, just the fact that everyone, for the most part, it's not like an athletic team where there's all this competition. You're constantly competing, going to games. There's more camaraderie. There's more support. You're part of a group. There's acceptance. That's a lot of what has typically been a part of a band experience, that I would say. One of the biggest lessons that I had just from having that role, you're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be good at everything. So you try to focus on the strengths that you have. Just know that you're not going to be good at some areas, and you do your best to manage those areas. And that's been a lesson that has stuck with me with all kinds of roles that I've had, all kinds of professional things. Like, you're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. You focus on your strengths and try to use those as much as you can to complete a task, just to get through things as well as you can.
Yeah,
so that's something that's stuck with me too.
Okay, so you started a scholarship. How do you start a scholarship? Like, I want to know all the things. How do you pick the person who gets the scholarship? Like, tell me all about your band scholarship, because I'm fascinated.
So there's been a learning process through that with me as well. So it's through the Bering County has a foundation, the Bering Community Foundation. I essentially was able to locate them and find them. So they run the scholarships. It's not solely within Bering County, for the most part within Bering County. So they have an application process for high schools there. I've learned about all this because people don't have an inherent knowledge to be able to set these things up. But the leaders of the organization met with me, talked about what this would look like, what my goals were, what I wanted the scholarship to be, and took me through that process. The president of the organization said this multiple times: "You're so young. You're so young, because people usually go through this typically when they're planning a will, to leave a legacy. A lot of times that's when it happens. So to do it, as a relatively young person, to be able to be a part of the process, to meet the scholarship recipients, I hope that more people kind of take that on and have that experience for themselves. But just to be able to share the experience with other kids, to encourage them to take that step, just like you were talking about your college experience. I think that happens a lot. College can be a really intimidating place. But just to know, even if you don't have those expectations, if you're not from a school, and there could be a lot of stress with being from schools where there's that expectation. But just knowing that it's possible, there's support that's out there and you can do it. So that's essentially the message and what I try to convey through that scholarship.
How do you pick the person who gets the scholarship?
The foundation has a process. So they have an application that gets filled out, and then there's committees that read the applications and select a recipient. So some of it is based on financial need. There's essays that get written. I think they usually get a transcript, so they look at grades also. But they have a process to sort all that out. They're nice enough to send me usually the applications just so I can review, and they may or may not ask who my choice would be, but they have a process to do that, because you want it to be objective, just like anything else. You don't want it to be, it's not going to be someone that I know or someone in my family, but it's as much as possible it's supposed to be objective.
Okay, so how do you, like, what would you search for if you wanted to start a scholarship? Because I love this idea. Like, what do you look for if someone else wants to do what you did?
There's usually a foundation that runs local scholarships. So figuring out what that organization is, even calling a school counselor, they should be able to point you in the right direction, because they will be able to collect. Ideally, they're going to be aware of these scholarships and how to encourage students to apply for them. So that's a good place to start also.
It's so fascinating. Like, I've never thought about starting my own scholarship until you did it. And again, you are so young. And I thought that was amazing that you did it. And I love like how niche it is. It's for like someone who's going to be in the band. So I just love that. And I love when you post the picture of like meeting the students. Like, it always brings a little tear to my eye, because I'm like, that's amazing. You're giving someone like an opportunity to do what you did and learn everything that you learned. So congrats. I love that.
I hear this from people. You can appreciate that. Sometimes you post things and you just don't know what the reaction is. So you're not the first person I've heard that from. And that makes me feel really good. Even I don't always get that feedback, but people typically have that reaction when I post it, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. So who would apply for your scholarship? Like, what are like when you look at scholarships, like how would someone find your scholarship? Is it someone who is, wanting to be a drum major? Like, what are the parameters?
It's someone who is going to go into a college band at this point. And we had it specific to the town. I grew up in Coloma, so it was specific to there for a little bit. And then we opened it up because there just aren't many kids from Coloma that end up wanting to go into a college band. So we opened it up to the county. And just the awareness, the foundation has changed the scholarship. So they don't have individual scholarships they don't have individual applications for every scholarship, which they used to have. So students fill out a general application and they check the scholarships that they want to apply for, which makes it a lot easier because there was marketing that I did for a while because we didn't have many applicants. So I created pens with my scholarship on it that I would take around to high schools and have them give them out. So I was doing marketing for it just to let kids know about the scholarship and the fact that it was there and they could apply for it. But
I love that.
That's easier now because they just fill out one application and then it's easier for them to find the scholarship and to identify that it's something they would qualify for. So it is easier now. So hats off to the foundation for adding that stuff. But I was driving around to all the Berrien County schools, stopping into high school offices, hoping they would buzz me in this day and age, with my pens to drop them off, just to be able to connect with some of the kids and some of the students.
It's amazing. So what kind of a place did you grow up in? Big city, small town? Like, tell me about like where you grew up.
It was a small town. That's the wonderful thing about being back. There's something about Michigan that draws people back. So it was a small town in West Michigan. So not around the Detroit area, Southwest Michigan, rural, sparsely populated, and just not as many resources as what you get in bigger schools where there's an expectation that kids are going to go to college. Like, it wasn't like that at all, which is kind of the reason that the scholarship is there, just to encourage kids to take that step. And as you know, just not having that encouragement makes a difference. And it's not to set the expectation that kids have to go to college, but just to encourage kids to do everything they can and maximize their potential. That's what it's all about. Just to let them know that it's a possibility. And there are those that have come from some of these places that have gone on to do some impressive things. So just to let them know that.
Yeah, I love that comment because, again, I work with a lot of people internationally who just assume that everyone in the US sort of lives in more of like a city that has a ton of resources. And I grew up in an area that not everyone went to college. And it was sort of a new thing that people went to college, because I grew up in a more of a blue collar industrial kind of an area where there were always jobs until there weren't. So a lot of people didn't go to college because you didn't need to. And so when you're trying to figure out, like, what do I do? It's not easy. I guess it's easier now because you have the internet, but thank God I had people who were like, well, you apply to the college and then you get scholarships and you have to get money, because I had no idea. Like, I didn't even know you had to take your own bedding to college. Like, I know that sounds dumb, like coming out of my mouth now, but like I had zero idea. So hats off to you for like helping out your, own community. And now it's expanded. And that is so amazing. So you help so many people. And my big kind of closing question is, how has your network helped you get to where you are? You help everyone else. How have you been helped?
It's important to have a network, right?
Mm-hmm.
And coming to a new place, coming to Western Michigan, I had to establish a network. And that's one of the intimidating things about going to a new place and starting a new job. Mm-hmm. Sometimes those things will be in place, but sometimes you're starting over. So as with any job, as with any situation, there's going to be challenges that come up. So, it's crucial and important to have that level of support. So, just with a lot of the projects that I've done, a lot of the research that I've been able to complete, it hasn't been done in isolation. So it's been a product of the network that I have, and I'm very fortunate to have. So, just like I said, no one's going to be good at everything. So relying on each other to work towards the goal of completing that project. I've been really good about having a network to support, help, continue to push things along. Writing is not easy. So that process of creating manuscripts is something that continues. And I'm fortunate to have network for that. A good, solid network to help with that process. So it's all about understanding that you can't do it on your own and just having some people help. And that's what your network is for.
Are you reading or listening or watching anything interesting that you want to recommend to people?
Just bad reality TV.
Oh, so what are you watching? I love reality TV.
I have never watched Drag Race, but I have started watching it.
I haven't watched it either, and I hear it's great.
And what I'll say about it, and it was the same thing back in the day with, I know it's still on, but it's just different for Project Runway. But just seeing the creativity is amazing, just to see what people come up with. And that's what I appreciate about it, is seeing people's talent, seeing what they're able to come up with. It's incredible to watch. Yeah. And just take it all in.
I'll have to watch it because I loved Project Runway for the same reasons that you were saying, just the creativity, the hard work. Like it's amazing. I love to see anyone who's just good at the thing that they're passionate about. Like I don't care what it is. I watched a TV show one time. I don't even know the name of it. It was on taxidermy. It was fascinating. It was a reality TV show and they literally just did taxidermy. And it was the most amazing thing because these men were so passionate about it and like just so good at it. It was like so creative. It was amazing. Okay. Well, is there anything that I've missed with our conversation today, Rodney, that I should have asked you, but didn't?
I don't think so. It was a good conversation. We talked about a lot of things.
Okay. Well, you are the best. Thank you so much for being here. So I'm just going to summarize quickly. I think your big takeaways are put yourself out there, do some good networking, really establish your group who's going to help you. That'll help you succeed. That'll help you with the points that maybe aren't your strengths, and it'll just kind of keep paying it forward. So Rodney, thank you so much for being here. This has been an absolute delight. And please come back if you have anything, that comes up that you want to discuss. We'd love to have you back on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a great day, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.